Lloyd Lewis, United States Marine Corps, World War II. Lloyd was 17 years old when he fought on Iwo Jima in 1945. He served with the 3rd Marine Division as a rifleman and then landed the day after D-Day on February 20th, 1945. He was with the 3rd Marine Division. The 4th and 5th Marine Divisions landed on February 19th, which was D-Day. Lloyd tells one of the most gripping stories I've ever heard. And the World War II stories, folks, that's my first love in the work that I've done. Over 20 years now, 1,000 interviews. And we're bringing you these stories one by one now. And I'm thankful for those of you that are stepping forward to help sponsor these interviews, to help donate towards me bringing them to you. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears has gone into these interviews and into this work, folks. And it's a labor of love. It takes a lot of resources to bring these stories to you. So Lloyd, God bless you. Thank you for sharing your story with me. I interviewed Lloyd in Logan, Utah in August of 2005. And like I said, his story is very gripping. He had a twin brother named Boyd, and they were both on Iwo Jima at the same time. And Lloyd's going to tell you the story about how his brother Boyd was killed in action. So I'd like to thank Alex Woolbrandt for sponsoring this video. Alex, God bless you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your passion to serve and to give back to this country. And you're making it possible for a lot of people to see Lloyd's story today. Like I said, this is one of my precious stories, and I'm so thankful to you, Alex. I salute you, sir. God bless you. And all of those who have helped sponsor my stories. If you'd like to sponsor one of these stories that I've recorded over the years, I would ask you to please get in touch with me. There's information in the video description and in the comment section of this video. So without further ado, I'm happy and excited to bring you Lloyd Lewis's story, his complete interview that I did with him. A Marine to the end, a Marine's Marine, folks. And God bless you for watching and sharing these stories. And I'll see you next time. Enjoy. No, you weren't.
I was 3rd Division.
Okay, you were with the 3rd Division. Okay. Did you go in on February 19th?
No.
Okay, you guys were held in reserve, right?
No, we came in the next day.
Oh, the next day.
Let's see, they landed the 19th, we came in on the 20th. We spent the whole day trying to get in. And they just, was so much debris, dead people laying in the waters and that, we couldn't get in. So they made us climb up, go back down the next day. Then we went right in. Instead of going into the beach we were supposed to go in, we had to go down and go into a red beach. Mm-hmm. Then we climbed over dead bodies to get back up to the division.
What do you remember about the night before you actually did go in? I mean, were you guys cleaning your rifles? What were you doing? I mean, what was your MOS? What was your job? You rifleman?
Rifleman.
Okay, PFC?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Do you remember the night before? Had you been in combat before? What did you know about Iwo Jima?
Nothing. It was a small island. We was told it's a small island. We should take it in 5 days, and then we can all go home and have a 30-day furlough.
The night before, were you nervous, or you'd done it before, or we're going to do it again?
Well, we all thought of the 30-day furlough. You know, small island, what the heck? Let's get it over with and go home and enjoy life.
What about the morning that you got up to go? Would you guys have a last meal? Did you have a prayer service? I mean, what were you?
Well, we didn't. We had a good meal, yes. The ship provided us a good meal. But then, as far as a prayer circle, where we was in our bunk, or where we was stacked up against the walls so tight that my brother and I had started church up on Guam. And so the guys told us, let's have a prayer that was in our hole. And so we just offered a word of prayer, went up, ate, climbed over the rope and went down. The night before, yes, we made sure that rifle was spotless.
Going down in the Higgins boat, you went in on the Higgins boat. Was that uneventful, or was it hard to do that, to go into the boat?
We had a storm come up the second day, and trying to get into that Higgins boat, there's a lot of legs smashed because the boat would go out and you drop down and it come in, and so it was tricky getting into the Higgins boat.
The ride in before, well, you guys were out there circling, but you rode in, and you said you were out there a whole day before. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh!
Yeah, we circled the whole day, just putting around, just putting around.
What are you hearing or seeing from the boat on shore or out in the ocean? What was going on?
Oh, shells and machine guns and rifles. It was war. It was really a war. They let the first wave go in. It came in, and there was a hump. Then it went over a little bit, and then another hump. And as they came over that second hump, they just wiped them out. They was ready for them. And everybody thought, boy, we're going to take this in a hurry. But as soon as they got over that second little hump, they just wiped them out. So the next day when we came in, I watched my sergeant, my lieutenant, everybody with a rank but my corporal die in the Higgins boat right next to me. The ramp went down, they killed them all. The next Higgins boat, when that ramp went down, they killed them all. So we had no rank. Everything but a corporal was shot. Then we took and climbed over bodies to get to where we're supposed to get over, where our division was. Because our division, they put us in the center. 4th on the right, 5th on the left. And we were right in the center, and they just slaughtered us. And so we just kept it going.
You had been in combat before, Lloyd, but is it a rude awakening? Is it baptism under fire? I mean, how do you mentally get through a situation, crawling over dead bodies, seeing your superiors killed? I mean, what keeps you going?
I think it's just the core. You're in there for a reason. And the reason we had to take an island for airplanes. And I think death, you don't think of death. Really, you're thinking, I hope it's not me, but that's all. If it is, what the heck, you don't worry no more. But up till then, it's hell. But to me, I concentrated on keeping this guy alive. I wanted to make sure this guy got home. And so that's the things that you was concerned about, was taking care of your buddies. Everybody take care of one another so we can all get home. But then you see one of your buddies get his whole jaw shot off, you pick him up and he's still breathing, can't talk, can't do anything, and then die in your arms. You just keep going.
Was it your faith in God, your training that really sets in?
I think it's a disciplined training we had. I think that was the thing that really kept us going, was the discipline. We done as we was told. There was no why, what, or how, or when. They say jump, you have jumped and asked if that was high enough. You just done as you was told.
Can I ask about Boyd? Can you tell me the story, what happened and where he was and where you were?
We had fought for 4 days. I took a piece of shrapnel in my back, which is still there. And I went down to the hospital because it was bleeding pretty bad. And all they did was pinch it together and put a piece of tape on it and wrap me, some iodine, and wrap me up. Said go down on the dock, get down on that dock, and they'll take you over to the hospital ship and they can take care of you, and then they'll send you back. Instead, I went back up on the line where Boyd was. And then we fought pretty well all that day. But we were fighting a hidden enemy. Now, you've probably heard of that before, because they had 27 miles of tunnels in under that little 5.5 square miles. 27 miles of tunnels and pillboxes. They had the higher ground with them pillboxes. Them big shells off the ship would just bounce off from them. So they were really no good to us. And they had 55-gallon drums. You'd see one or two. If you seen one or two, they'd run over and jump down into them barrels. But on the way, they'd be tossing grenades in holes if there was 3 or 4 guys. We were told later that the commander of the Japanese said, you kill 10 Americans before you die. And so that's what they was trying to do, kill 10 Americans. And so we was fighting that day. You'd see, to us, we kind of looked to the south, to the north. And if you saw a flash, you take your rifle and sight in on that flash. And when the second flash come out, you pulled your trigger, squirrels off around. And if it didn't come another flash, you got him just below the helmet, because he was looking out that little slit, and that's where you'd get him. And so that's how we was fighting them. And so then we fought that day, and then at night, it never got dark. That island was always alight with flares. So everybody could see you. We had this corporal for 2 days. 2 days. And then he got shot in the arm, and it paralyzed his 3 fingers. But the bullet went right through. But it paralyzed his 3 fingers, so he couldn't hold the rifle. So they sent him out. And so then we had no authority. There was nobody, only PFCs. But in battle, there's no rank anyway. There's no rank. I don't care who you are. Be a big general, but there on the island, you're not nobody. You're just the same as anybody else, a PFC. And so they took, and I happened to get a hold of the walkie-talkie. I don't know how I got it, but after the sergeant, he handed it to me, I think. And so then I phoned back in and told the colonel that we needed some help. We was so thin on our line up where we was supposed to be that they could come through us any time. And so I told the colonel, we've got to have help. And so then he got on the phone and called the 4th Division, and they weren't losing so many casualties that they sent us up some recruits to help us. And as they was up there, we was placing them in the line where I needed to have them. And so then we went through the night, and the next morning we went fighting. And towards evening, about 5 o'clock, we looked up, and there come 2 whistling willies. You've probably heard of the whistling willies. And we knew it was close. But you don't run, because the minute you jump up, you'd be shot anyway. So we just covered up our eyes. You can lose an arm or a leg, not the eyes. So we covered up our eyes and kind of went into a ball because we knew they was close. The next thing I knew, I was blown out of the hole. I was airborne, and I went out, and I hit the ground, and I thought I was dead because I was bleeding from everything from my head, eyes, nose, mouth, ears. The concussion was so great, it felt like it blew my brains out. Really, I thought, but I could still think. I still could think. And so finally the blood cleared up out of my eyes, and I tried to tune my brother in because we were so identical, we could talk to one another without saying a word. I always said all them years that we was together, I had two bodies, but one mind. Because I knew what his appetites, passions, his desires, his thinking was every minute of the day. And he knew mine. And so I got trying to tune him in, and he didn't tune in. And so from where the hole was to where I am, kind of like a diagonal, I'm over this way, I come out this way, and the hole was there, but there was a helmet down over this way. And instinct or whatever told me to crawl to that helmet. When I got there, I picked up his head. I looked around and I found just parts. That one hit him directly. Right. I say, as he was bending over, it caught him right here, because everything was gone. Just pieces. And so I gathered him up and got on the walkie-talkie and got a hold of the colonel and said that my brother had got killed. And I'd like to be released long enough to come back and get him buried. So he said, go ahead. And so whatever I gathered up, I put it in the poncho. So here I had it on my back, and there's so many guys that had this. It was so rough that they just went nuts. They couldn't fight. They couldn't even hardly talk. They just was out of it. So they'd send them back, get rid of them, get them out, get somebody that could still fire a rifle. And so I got permission to go back to the hospital. And I went back, and the doctors met me there, and here I am just carrying him on a poncho. And the doc said, what have you got there? And I said, I got my brother. Oh, for hell's sakes, he says, what are you talking about? He says, we're so busy here. There's a pile of dead bodies as high as a great big pyramid, just laying there. They'd wrap them up in whatever they could find, spray them with the gas so the bugs and the insects wouldn't eat them, because there's no boxes, no nothing, just put them in the ground. Well, he says, we're so busy here, what have you got? I said, I've got my brother. He just made me mad. Finally, I says, let me show you. And I laid it down and opened up the poncho, and I said, there's my brother. And he about died. He says, what do you want? And I said, is there any water that I could clean him up a little? Somebody had taken his bracelet. We had a bracelet with our names on. Somebody that helped me took that off, and the dog tags were still on his neck, and they disappeared while we was cleaning him up. And then after we got him cleaned up the best we could with what I had, I rolled him back up in the poncho, and they sprayed it, and then I went out to the cemetery, and they showed me a spot to dig, and so I dug, and by the time I got it all dug, he had been set up. He was ready to be buried, and so I took him up and put him in the ground, and thought, well, it's hell, but life's going to go on, I guess, because I'm still alive. I should have died with him. I wanted to die. I really did. Because my life had ruined. Half of me died when he died. So I took and got back, picked him up, took him out and buried him. And whoever had the dog tags put one on the cross, I guess, because I never put nothing on the cross. I didn't even put this cross in the ground. I just buried him. Then I went back, went up online and got on the walkie-talkie and told the colonel I'm there. Wanted to know what the orders was up for the next morning. That I needed more men, because that day we'd lost a lot more. And so they got the 4th Division to send us up a few more recruits, because all the recruits that they had around us, they'd shipped them into us, and they were dead or wounded. And you just we was still trying to hold on what we had. And that was just a little ways. That was the 5th day. The 6th day, when I was there alone, we was just up almost past the first airfield, Moniacha number 1. We was just past that airfield, in the center. Just all we seen was sand. And they kept telling us to move out, and we'd move out. And some days we'd move out 50 yards and get kicked back 25. Because they'd just pour the machine guns on us, and you couldn't stand. And we'd call for plane support, but that was no good. Them big holes they had, them pillboxes, bounced. The big shells would bounce off from them, the bombs would bounce off, blow up. But it would be sending shrapnel over our way because it's in the air. And so we couldn't get no help from them. And then, like I say, them big ships was bringing in. And at night you could see it looked like 2 shells, one fate racing the other, coming in. And if they landed where they wanted them to, then they'd send in a bunch. But them 2 were the guy, whoever was the guy directing that, back on that battle wagon, whatever he was directing, I think they could have dropped a shell in a gallon bucket. They were that accurate. Once they got the reading and the azimuth and everything they had to do, that was ready. It was on target. And so they just turn them loose. And so then the colonel got me on the phone and said, "Go home. Come on back down and let's send you home. You've paid your price." I said, "No, he did. Now I'm going to kill some more sons of bitchin' Japs." And so I went back up online, got up there and got organized, and we got some more help, and we fought all day, and that day we made 100 yards. Remarkable. That whole line was with me. We just went, and sure, a guy would fall, but you just kept going. Just kept going. And I wanted to die, so I just was pushing. And the guys followed me. And we made 100 yards, and we held it. And the colonel says, "No, Lloyd, get out of there. You can't win this war alone. Now, come on, get out of there." And by then, the recruits that we'd got from the 4th Division had come up, and I started replacing them. They all come into the big shell hole that we was in. And I was trying to tell them to go where the line to get into their position to help us. And I looked, and there came a hand grenade in that hole. And my instinct, I don't think it was bravery. I don't think I was even thinking. I just grabbed my helmet, threw it down, and jumped on it. Well, it went off. The corpsmen come. I was bleeding real bad, and they put a lot of scissors that they had. And then they took me down to the hospital, and they tried to stop the blood there, and then they sent me down onto a little bolt, PT bolt, it looked to me like. And they run me right out over to the President Jackson, because all the hospital ships were full. Every ship that had an operating room, they was filling them. And I got sent back onto the President Jackson, and a gurney, a big cable came down, picked up my gurney and put me up. And well, I call it gurney. At least that's what they carried us in. And then they set me on the gurney and run me right into the operating room. And they operated on me all night long, trying to stop the bleeding. And they was putting blood in one arm and plasma in the other. And I told the doc, "Just forget me. Look at these other guys. They're worse off than I am. Just let me die." He says, "As long as there's life in your body, you're going to live." And so I kept going my way, and finally they got the bleeding pretty well under control. It was seeping in spots, and it took this part of my body out, right there. And they kept me up here and just pulled it open. Just what they could. They pulled it open, and I could look into it. And they had scissors and clamps and everything in there trying to get the blood and trying to get things organized. And finally, as soon as I got on ship, we took off, and they took me to Saipan. And there on Saipan, the hospital was waiting for us, and they took me right on in. And there in the hospital there, they took me in and surveyed me and seen that the blood was still seeping. And so they sent a little girl down to give me a bath. And I looked at her and I said, you know, my mother's the only one that ever saw me in the nude, and you are not going to do it. Now, there's corpsmen around here. Send me a corpsman and we'll get the job done. And I talked her out of it. She went back, and pretty soon coming down the hall was just like a horse. Clunk, clunk, clunk. She had shoulders that broad and the sweetest voice you ever heard. Now, is that the way to treat my nurses? I said, well, I have never had nobody look at this body but my mother. And that's when I was younger. When I got older, she didn't even look. And I said, no woman's going to bother me. She tipped up my record on the bottom of the bed, tipped it up and read it, put it down, came up right up to the side of me. And that's when she says, you know, you shouldn't treat my nurses like that. I said, well, send me a corpsman. She took her big hand, slapped me aside of the head. I mean, she about took my head off. She says, I'll bet you I can give you a bath. She threw the covers off, pulled that little thing you have on, you know. They had it cut off right there so they could just look. Everything was bare, just a little thing. And she yanked that thing off, picked me up and took me over and sit me in a chair and strapped me in that chair. Took me over and dropped me down into a 55-gallon drum because I'd never been cleaned up. I'd still had all the blood, I had everything. And they dropped me in that barrel. It must have had a lot of peroxide because it was foaming. And I said, what are you doing, you dumb bitch? I said, yeah, I guess I'm trying to fight for life, and now you're going to kill me with acid. She said, shut your mouth or I'll put your head in it. And so she picked me out of that one and put me, time I went through 3 barrels, I was as white as them doors. I was as clean as you couldn't have scrubbed anybody cleaner than I was in them 3 barrels.
Hey, Lloyd, you said you fell on a grenade. I missed some of that. A grenade came out and you were trying to save your buddies. What happened again? Say that again.
Well, as I was trying to place them, telling them where to go onto my line, this grenade come in. So just not thinking, I think maybe coward. I am a coward. Took my helmet, threw it down, jumped on it.
Okay, so the helmet took some of the concussion.
Took some of it.
Or you would have been gone, huh?
Oh, it would have blown me because it was a big grenade, and it just took everything out here.
Yeah.
Took everything out there, and the dock, when we got on ship, and then I got to Saipan, they kept working on me. And when I finally got to Pearl Harbor, after I spent 30 days at Saipan, then I was sent to Pearl Harbor, and I spent another 30 days there. And by the time I got there, they had got the bleeding pretty well stopped, but I was still wide open. And our chaplain Bowd of Salt Lake City, he was over there, and he was the first Mormon chaplain that was ever put into the services. And he said he went to get in the Jeep, and he came right up to the hospital, the Aiea Heights Hospital, and came right to my room. I was in a little room just with a bed, just off to the side of the nurses' quarters. I was put right there where they could watch me, I guess. And I was all the time pulling out those damn things out of my arms, so they strapped me down to the bed, my legs and my arms. So I was tied in that bed. And he said when I come in, he thought that I was romping and roaming, and I was yelling and I was carrying on because I didn't want all that attention. I wanted to get it over with. Let's die, get it over with. And he finally come in and talked to me. And then he said, "Do you want a blessing?" And in my mind, I knew who he was the minute he came in the door. In my mind now, I knew that. But when he said, "Do you want a blessing?" I guess I nodded my head. And he gave me a blessing. And up to that point, I would have never come home from Pearl Harbor. If I'd have lived, I'd have stayed Pearl Harbor because I didn't want to come home. But that blessing gave me the will to live. Instead of climbing a great big mountain, it was a molehill. Then after I spent 30 days there, I was sent to San Francisco. And there in the hospital there, we were set on trucks. The truck motors would start every morning and every night. Because if we got bombed, that hospital would move. The trailers was down in the ground, so we could come in with wheelbarrows from going over to the operating room or come in. They would sit down right in the ground, but the trucks was all hooked to them, so that if just a spur of the moment, just one siren, I think, that whole hospital would move. And I spent 15 days there in that hospital. Then I had a choice to go to Seattle or to Sandpoint, because that's the Navy. Sandpoint was the Navy hospital, or out to Sandpoint in Seattle. And I had an aunt in Seattle, so I took Seattle. And I got sent up there, and while I was there, this Doc Talbot started to put me together, started sewing things up, and finally I got to where I was carrying 2 bags. Then they sewed this all up. And I was carrying these 2 bags, and then I had decided I felt good. I was getting around. I'd go down and talk to my aunt and I was doing all right. But I was having hard nights. So I always went back to the hospital at nights because, boy, after I got married, I have had these hard nights that my wife got out of bed many a nights and climbed in with a kid because she couldn't stand the way I was romping and roaming in the bed. But as time went on, they've got a little better. And now they got a pill that helps, that if you feel like it's a night that you're going to be in trouble, take this pill and it relaxes you. I think it's a knockout pill, and it helps.
Tell me about life without Lloyd and after the war, and then probably living your life for him, and then your parents being notified of his death and you're being wounded. What did your parents say about that, or did you hear the story about the notification when it came?
All Mother told me was they hadn't heard from us for 30 days. And here come a letter, and I addressed it to Dad. So Dad, I told him, "You're stronger, and read it, and then go tell Mother and my little sister." But my little sister went and picked up the mail and hadn't heard from us for 30 days. So she got Mother to open it. And Mother read it, and my sister went uptown to get something for her, and it told somebody, and the bishop come and told her, you can't believe everything now. He's probably dead and you don't know it, and here you got a letter from him. He could have died since you got that letter. And she said, "No, if he said he's alive and he's in Seattle, I know he's all right." And so I can't explain really the first life after he was gone. That first year was something that nobody will ever know what I went through.
Well, what are your thoughts about Boyd today, 60 years ago?
Well, maybe it was for the best, because we were so identical that we'd planned to build a house. Half of it would be his, half of it would be mine. And if the two women couldn't get along, they could leave. So maybe now it was meant that, why me? I don't know. Why couldn't I have gone? Because I always thought he was the stronger one. But Mother said, no, it's always been you, the strong one. And so I was able to come home. And after the first year, I decided I got in trouble with the Japs in Seattle. Crossed a guy's lawn that had a trail, and finally a Jap come out and told me I couldn't walk across his lawn no more. I had him dead, just about dead. I manhandled him, threw him on the ground. I was choking him. My uncle seen it, come up, and instead of wrestling me off from him, he just talked me off. Now look at what you're doing. Now he's a civilian of the United States. Now leave him alone. And I got off from him, and then when I got home, Mother would give away all our clothes, what we had, and so I was just wearing my uniform because I got him to let me come home early to go to school, to finish my high school. And so as I was walking past the Japanese, I grew up with a Japanese girl in Preston. They had a cafe. But at that time, when I got home, they had this labor camp of these older Japanese boys to help with the farmers, get the crops in, the potatoes and the beets and that. And there was three of them standing in front of that cafe, and as I come by, one of them made some remark. All I saw was fire, and I beat them guys. I knocked one through the big plated glass. I knocked the other one out so bad that he just laid on the sidewalk, and I grabbed the third one, knocked him down, picked up a piece of glass, and I was going to cut his throat. As the sheriff caught up with me by then, and he grabbed my arm and says, now that's it. And he took and called the commander down at the labor camp, and he come, and so they went and took me to the judge. And that's what I happened up at Seattle. I had to go see the judge, and the judge, the doctor up there then told him what I'd went through, and so the Japanese guy dropped the charges of assault and battery.
Lloyd, we just got a few minutes. I asked Rex this question too. Looking back 60 years, being a World War II veteran, what does freedom and the price for freedom mean to you?
That old glory. I don't want to ever see anybody try to destroy that old glory. Because that freedom, when I look back, wherever we was at, and our flag was flying, from where I'm at to where it's at, it's ours. And it's ours for good. And you're not going to take my freedom away from me. Boy, that's what we fought for, was for freedom. And so that flag means the world to me. Because when I seen that raise up on the Iwo Jima, that was the best sight I've ever seen in my life. Because we was seeing so much death, but yet there's freedom. For me to that top of that flag up on Mount Suribachi, I was free. I might not make it through the day, but I'm free right now because that flag says from where I'm at back there, it's our land, it's freedom. So that's what freedom means to me.
I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. I've asked every veteran to do this. I had Rex do it. Could I have you look into the camera in just a second here and give me a salute? Okay, go ahead, right into the camera.